No apologies have been received. I'm aware of, does anybody have any other apologies they want to note? Okay, if not, we'll move on to agenda item 2, draft minutes of the previous meeting. You'll find them at page 5 of your pack. If members have no comments, are we content to agree them?
Good.
Okay. Agenda item 3, members will recall, matters arising, members will recall that we wrote to the Assembly Commission to ask that arrangements be put in place to accommodate e-petitions. A response has been received from the Speaker, and this is at page 9. The letter outlines the work being carried forward by the IS office, and a prototype of the new e-petition system should shortly be ready for testing. The IS office has offered to provide the committee with a short demonstration of the system upon completion of this testing. Now, we're going to obviously want to wait until that is completed before we do that, but if members are content, we'll ask the clerk to liaise with the IS office regarding the scheduling of the demonstration. So, members, agenda item 4 then, moving on to the review of private members' bills, and we have an oral briefing today. At the last meeting, the committee agreed the terms of reference for the review, and you'll find this at page 13. Part of the terms of reference is to research the procedures governing private members' bills and the support and resource available in other jurisdictions. A research paper has been prepared, and you'll find this at page 22 of your packs. And at this stage, Ray, you're very welcome. Thank you for coming along. And if you want to go ahead and brief, and then we'll take questions from members afterwards.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. The research was asked to provide information on a number of specific points relating to private members' bills in other legislatures. These included formal and informal procedures governing the passage of private members' bills and the nature of support that is available, such as guidance, standing orders, conventions, and other administrative practices. The level of support available, the level of resource, both in terms of financial and staff that is available, selection and prioritisation criteria, how any conflict is resolved if there are 2 submissions on the same subject, processes around co-sponsorship bills, and whether procedures exist to allow other members to indicate support for private members' bills. As the paper states, there were really 2 main sources of information used to inform the research. This was publicly available information such as guidance documents and also direct correspondence with relevant officials in other legislatures. So, Chair, I'll just address the key points in relation to each legislature in terms of opportunities for members to progress the bill and how the process is administered. Turning first to the House of Commons, there are 3 ways in which an MP can attempt to introduce a bill. The ballot. These bills have the best chance of becoming law as they get priority for the limited amount of debating time available. Normally, out of the 20 names selected, the first 7 ballot bills are most likely to get a day's debate. And sort of 2 lesser opportunities, the 10-minute rule, which is really an opportunity for MPs to voice an opinion on an issue rather than a serious attempt to get a bill passed. And presentation bills, which rarely become law, but any MP can introduce a bill in this way as long as they have given notice of their intention to do so. In terms of the information received directly from the House of Commons, the emphasis is really on bills. As the paper states, many 10-minute rule bills and presentation bills never get beyond the short and long titles. And that when it comes to drafting, the priority is to get the ballot bills drafted. There is limited financial support of £200 for assistance in drafting ballot bills. On the issue of drafting, the government, in the form of the Office of Parliamentary Counsel, drafts most handout bills. These are bills that are given to members to take forward as private members' bills if the government, for example, doesn't have time to do it itself. The clerk of private members' bills drafts some ballot bills and draws in drafting resources from other parts of the House, such as lawyers in the scrutiny unit. In terms of resolving conflicts and similar submissions, it's really a first-come, first-serve. Members are advised to have a backup proposal or to speak to their colleague if 2 members happen to be in the same party who are planning to bring forward similar proposals. Processes around co-sponsorship of bills. Well, a bill may have, but doesn't need, up to 11 members as supporters. There's really no informal method of indicating support other than through sponsorship. Turning to the Scottish Parliament, a member cannot introduce more than 2 members' bills in the same session. That session being a mandate. The process is that a member must lodge a draft proposal and then a final proposal. The draft proposal must be accompanied either by a consultation document or by a statement of reasons why the member does not consider consultation as necessary. As all members' bills are referred to an appropriate committee, a committee can decide that it isn't satisfied with the reasons the member has given for not consulting, and in such circumstances the bill will fall unless the member takes action within 2 months to consult. By the time the final proposal is lodged, the member's policy is expected to be reasonably well developed. The bill couldn't substantially extend beyond what was set out in the proposal, for example. This really serves to protect those members who supported the proposal so they can have a reasonable expectation of what the bill will look like. What happens then is that after sitting on the business bulletin for a month, if the bill has received support from at least 18 other members, from at least half the groups on the Parliamentary Bureau, and the government has not exercised its right to block it, then the member can introduce it. So there is quite a sort of high threshold there, if you like. The Non-Government Bills Unit provides the administrative support to members, including preparing a summary of responses to the consultation for the member to lodge alongside a final proposal. And again, Chair, just turning directly to the information provided from officials in the Scottish Parliament and just sort of draw out some of the key points from it. The Non-Government Bills Unit has a budget of around £30,000 to use external drafters for members' bills. However, this also is used for committee bills. The unit aims to support every member who seeks its support. It doesn't operate any further selection or prioritisation criteria, but it could go to the Scottish Parliamentary Corporate Body to get authorisation to prioritise some over others if it was facing a level of demand that it felt it couldn't meet. There's nothing to stop 2 or more members seeking to lodge the same proposal or to introduce members' bills, and the unit would not withhold support on the basis that another member had a similar proposal in progress. Once a bill is introduced, other members' names can be listed on the back of the bill as supporters, but this is purely symbolic. The National Assembly for Wales, as with the House of Commons, it operates a ballot system. To be eligible, members must submit pre-ballot information, which consists of the proposed title of the bill and an explanatory memorandum. The memorandum must contain the policy objectives of the bill and details of any support received, including details of any consultation carried out. No member who was previously successful in the ballot in that mandate may apply. I think that has just been recently introduced because I think there was a member who was successful twice in the previous mandate. I assume that's perhaps why that was changed. So only one member's name is drawn in the ballot, and that member has up to 25 working days from the ballot to seek the Assembly's agreement to introduce a bill. That motion itself will be debated within 35 working days of the ballot having taken place. There is no requirement to undertake a consultation, but members are advised to do so as it can assist them in the leave to proceed debate. When it comes to support, the member will be supported by a bill team which may include, alongside the responsible clerk, members of the research service and members of the legal service. So really I suppose that in some respects it's broadly similar to the position in Scotland and here at the Assembly. In terms of the information received directly from colleagues at the National Assembly for Wales, they stated that the preference is to keep the number of ballots reasonably low. Ideally there won't be 2 members' bills running at the same time. In terms of similar proposals being brought forward, in the last Assembly there were 13 proposals on the same subject, but as there is only 1 ballot, this doesn't really present a problem. They did advise that the presiding officer could allow multiple ballots, but that this was unlikely. There's no formal process for allowing co-sponsorship, but members could possibly indicate their support for a bill in the explanatory note if they wish. Chair, just quickly on the Dáil, mostly relying on information provided from officials. The Bill Office administers an external drafting project for which €45,000 is available on an annual basis to procure drafting services. No single bill can exceed €5,000. Although they did advise, perhaps surprisingly, that uptake was fairly low in the previous Dáil. Private members' bills are expected to be introduced at the same standard as government bills in terms of the drafting. Interesting, over the course of this current mandate, the Office of the Parliamentary Legal Advisor will take over the role of drafting private members' bills, so I think that project that runs with the €45,000 available, will run its course. There will be a change. They're not sure how that's going to be administered at the moment. Parties or groups with a minimum of 5 members do not need to seek leave to introduce a private member's bill, but only one private member's bill per group can be on the order paper at any one time. Previously, there had been a standing order that allowed a bill to be ruled out of order on the basis that a similar bill was already on the order paper. But the officials advised that this was not reintroduced, so there is currently no impediment to having numerous bills dealing with the same matter on the order paper. And there is no difficulty with multiple members sponsoring a bill, and indeed this is a common occurrence. Chair, that's just a quick overview, just really a couple of concluding thoughts that came out from the research. I suppose if the problem is that there's too much stress being placed on the system, then there are maybe a few points that sort of come out from the research. One is that do you increase the level of resource available to administer the system? Secondly, do you limit the number of bills that are in the system at any one time? For example, do you get into the territory of a ballot system such as that operates in Wales? And finally, which is really related to that point as well, do you raise the threshold for members wishing to introduce a bill? For example, could you require cross-party support to be demonstrated, signatures from other members, albeit that would perhaps raise particular issues around the political context within which the Assembly operates? Chair, that's sort of hopefully teased out the main points of the paper, so I'm happy to try and address any questions.
Okay, thanks very much for your presentation and for the work that you've done on this paper. Are you able to give us any indication of how successful private members' bills have been in each of these other jurisdictions, and has anything come through that you think one system above the other seems to have allowed more to come through?
In terms of numbers, I think it's roughly around 8 or 9 in the House of Commons in the last session. 9 bills were taken forward as a result of the ballot process in Wales in the last mandate. Off the top of my head, I don't know how many of those became law. Scottish Parliament, there were 30 proposals at least put in, and again, Chair, I would just need to double check how many of those bills became law. None of the legislatures raised specific concerns with how they administer their process. The Procedures Committee in the House of Commons has undertaken an evaluation of the private members' bill process. And again, it's sometimes difficult to compare the House of Commons with other legislatures given the scope and size of the system that they operate. But one of the things that they did say is that they would like to see better, more developed bills come through at the first stage, because otherwise they feel that the limited time available isn't being used properly. So that was one of their recommendations.
It's interesting that in the Scottish Parliament, before it goes to the floor, is that right? Before it goes to the floor of the Scottish Parliament, needs to have the support of 18 other MSPs. There's no such requirement in the is that right?
No formal requirement, Chair.
Okay. And just going back to the Scottish Parliament, again, you said there's a budget of 30,000 a year for private members' bills. That's also, that budget has to be shared with committees? That's
for committee. That can be used for committee bill
as well. So who takes precedence there, or is the money there and as soon as it's done, it's done?
Chair, again, I don't know off the top of my head. I'm assuming that committee bills would have to take precedence over private members' bills, though.
But I take it that if that 30 were to run out and there's still committee bills to come through, they would still...
Well, I think that they also have, their internal, that's just their external drafting service.
Right,
They
okay.
have resource internally as well.
Okay, thank you. Fra?
Chair, it's just 30,000 in total. Is that to cover all the bills that are going through? Is that an individual bill? And what is the purpose of 30,000? And I think you spoke about that paying the drafters of the bill. Also, as part of that 30,000.
Yes, that's just their external drafting service that they have a resource for. They would have an internal resource as well. I'm not sure. I know that Doyle places a limit of €5,000 per bill. I don't think Scotland places a limit on each individual bill. But they will have an internal resource as well. It's just sort of additional money that they have to go external.
Is that to cover one bill, or is it to cover all the bills?
It's to cover private members' bills and committee bills.
But it's to cover them all. And like 30,000 seems a fairly limited amount of money, especially when you face with probably the amount of private members' bill that we would be facing. You know, when you come to the end of that, then they decide that, who makes the decision to extend the resource of finance available.
I don't have that in.
All right, Stephen?
Chair, just following on from that point, I recently asked our bills office, on average, what would it cost for the drafting of a private member's bill, and was told it was between £7,000 to £22,000 for a single bill. So those figures do seem incredibly low to me. I'm wondering how they do it in the Dáil at all, unless they're getting better rates somewhere. So I'm not sure if that's something to look at. Do we know what the budget is for the bills off in the Assembly in terms of drafting?
Don't have that.
We could get that information.
I think some of the confusion here comes from the fact that there are in-house
Yeah,
drafters,
in-house, right.
and this money would be used exclusively, that 30,000 would be used exclusively for outside drafters. Would that be right, Ray?
Yes, the Bills Unit maintains a panel of external drafters whom it can instruct to draft members and committee bills, and the unit has a budget of around 30,000 a year for this purpose.
But
Okay.
internal drafters could still be used?
They would have internal drafters as well.
All right, Conor Murphy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going through this. It seems that we have too many bills. We don't have the resource for it, and perhaps not the time, but certainly don't have the resource. So the question is then, how do you narrow down the number of bills without being sort of arbitrary? If you're saying we're only taking a certain amount per mandate, then it causes a rush on day one when people are putting in bills that they don't necessarily follow through with, and perhaps denying other people the opportunity, or indeed the opportunity to do a bill of something that arises during the course of the mandate if the slots are already filled up. In Scotland, obviously, you have to get 18 signatures, which could prove difficult, certainly for smaller parties here to get that. So it seems a stretch to try and insist that somebody has it. Are there any other examples of how people kind of make a judgment call in relation to what is worthy of going forward or not worthy, you know, an agreed set of rules, that somebody's genuinely serious about bringing a bill, they've done the background work for it, they've, you know, it is an issue that, you know, that there are some criteria other than kind of a ballot, potluck, 18 signatures. Is there any other sort of more valued judgment call in terms of deciding? Because if we have too many bills, not enough resource, then we'll have to find some way of weeding out a number, and without being arbitrary about it, just sort of pulling a figure out of the air or writing a cut-off date. Is there any, have you any experience from any other jurisdiction that there's a more valued judgment put on what is worthy of going forward and what's not?
Well, and Chair, I suppose if you look at the Scottish Parliament, you know, it's about, you know, the initial proposal, the final proposal. It's trying to get bills up to a certain level where they're perhaps ready to be introduced. I suppose in a way, and that's what I was saying in my just concluding remarks, is that if you have a limited amount of resources, then how do you kind of, is it a case of upping the level of resources or stopping the number of bills? I think probably what comes through is that there's a reluctance to say to members, obviously, you can't sort of introduce a bill. I mean, and again, that's what the House of Commons, their recommendation is, that they're saying, well, we'd like to see better developed bills because time is so limited that members are coming forward with proposals that perhaps aren't that well developed. You know, there should be a sort of a, you know, how you would apply a threshold to say that this bill is now ready to proceed. I know in the Dáil there's an expectation that members' bills are introduced at the level, at the standard, I suppose, one would expect of a government bill. But how do you make that sort of judgment call? I mean, as the member was saying, I mean, it does seem arbitrary somehow to say, well, you need 18 signatures. And certainly in the context of our assembly, that could be problematic. As a ballot, perhaps the way to go, to think about that, where it's just one member every sort of 3 or 4 or 5 months who is successful, and everyone sort of knows where they stand in that regard.
I just think that the ballot is fairly arbitrary. You know, there could be a bill with great merit that is actually current or something that's a pressing problem, but another one gets drawn out just by luck of the draw.
And well, Chair, that is because in Wales, one member's successful, but there's maybe 25 proposals that don't get selected, that miss out due to the ballot.
Reading the books.
Okay, anybody else?
Previously, we were allowed to use office cost allowance to develop bills. As a result of the IFR's rulings, we can't. It seems a tad bizarre because one of the key roles of an MLA is a legislator. And if you cannot use some of the resource that you have to legislate, that seems a tad silly, particularly whenever the overall assembly is under a fair degree of stress when it comes to actually supporting members through private members' bills. So personally, I think that we've had a number of very good private members' bills, and the assembly is quite good at screening them out. And I think it's something that should be encouraged for people to be innovative and think of things that, you know, the civil service and ministers won't come up with because someone is just closer to a particular issue. And if the Assembly sees value, it can take it forward, and if it doesn't, it won't. But I think that we should be looking at how we can help people to produce private members' bills as opposed to closing it down.
Just one point, and it's actually Sean Connor raised and Edmund raised that, and again it goes around costs. That there was 30,000 available there. That and I think looking at some figures, I think I said that up to now there was 18 or 19 there, with more people looking to bring them in. How do you divide the costs, and when you take into consideration that there, and Connor raised it, that there are people who take it so far and then drop the thing? Surely that's a cost also, and impacts on the overall cost of the preparation of a bill. You know, it seems to throw things into chaos rather than dealing with the objective which has been said is to provide legislation.
Is there some sort of example of loads of dropped bills kicking around somewhere that I'm unaware of? Or is there? Or is there a...
Well, there's 19 or so sitting in there, so it depends how many of them have been progressed at any stage. And I know they're only a couple of months. Same as if you took an arbitrary figure, somebody could be sitting, 2 or 3 people could be sitting with a bill that they don't now intend to proceed with, and unless they dropped it, then it sits there and it doesn't allow others to go ahead.
I think there's a logic to the Scottish model. I think there's a logic to the Scottish model. 18 may be a bit high, but there's a logic to, you know, just one person going off on something that they see is important to try to get some support for it.
If you have a ballot, I think the problem with a ballot is most people could put their names in, and then somebody could think, oh, I've been successful, what am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
And it's not maybe someone that really, really wants it. And then if you put a monetary figure on it as well, there could be some really, really good proposals that will require an awful lot of work and perhaps a lot of research and a lot of money with it, and that could use up a budget. And then there could be other private members' bills that could be very, very simple and straightforward afterwards, but they won't take them then because there's a limit on it. So if we need to have some way of controlling the numbers, if a ballot doesn't work, and if, you know, putting a monetary fund on it is causing problems as well, maybe it is reasonable to say, well, you know, can we get a certain number of members that would be behind this? Because you're going to need 50 plus MLAs for a bill to
You don't get affiliates at the start.
anyway.
You're not going to succeed in any event.
You know, even if you're a member of a single person party, and if you weren't even able to get support from 5 or 10 others, then how are you going to get that support later on instead?
Obviously not a member of a single person party, but
Congratulations. Yes.
I think it's worth, I suppose, pointing out some of the things that are done. If you don't progress certain stages by a certain date, your bill will fall. The Bill's office will essentially drop you from that sense. So it's important to note that if no progress is made on a bill, that there are provisions in place. It would be worth finding out from the last 2 mandates how many private members' bills had, I suppose, were initially tabled and how many got, what proportion got the first stage. On the point of getting signatories, I know there was significant opposition to my bill when I started it. The one thing I will say is the bill's process does allow you time to build up that support. If you're introducing a fairly new idea, parties will not sign up until they're convinced of its merits. And I think that I certainly find that now.
Or the public convince them of its merits?
Well, yeah. I see where members are coming from with that, but I'd probably be more inclined the threshold being along the lines of how much preparatory work you've done to show you're serious, as opposed to maybe an arbitrary figure of how much support you need to get at the start, because say part of the process in my experience is building that support.
I concur with most of that. Be pretty wary of having to get support. I think your bill is a good example, but you may not have cleared certain thresholds at the start, and by the end,
Do you think you'd have struggled
Clearly
with
have.
5 or 10 supporters? Sorry.
I think 5 or 10. At that point, there was 2 parties supported from the outset. But I think it's if you're coming up with something completely novel where the parties are saying, I don't know, you know, and as I say, if you're introducing something new, parties will start with, I don't know, we'll need to go discuss it. And that's where I would be worried. You know, if you're coming up with something novel, parties maybe don't have a position on it. You need to give that process time to develop and give the member time to build that support.
Okay, Colin?
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. These are just rambles as part of the conversation here because I wasn't here for the start of it, so maybe mentioning something that has already been covered. But can any consideration be given at a proposal stage about banding how long it might take for a bill? That you could sort of say that you could take 10 bills that mightn't take very long to deliver and 3 or 4 slightly more complex ones, rather than, because if each bill is considered in its own merit, but one might take 2 or 3 months to do and one might take 1.5 years to do, but if you kind of were able to attach some sort of time, you could say that you could take more of a particular category and less of some of the bigger ones. And has any thought been given to maybe how, I mean, I think Evan makes a point rightly, we're here to legislate and sometimes people want to get a private member's bill because it gets their name onto something, but it can only be one, and if there maybe was an option for 2 or maybe a third name to go on to a bill that they could be sort of co-work together, then you mightn't have just as many coming in because people might be able to put their efforts together, and you may even get some cross-party private member bills, or, you know, but I don't think that's possible at the minute. Is that something that could be considered, or...?
Everything's on the table, I suppose, at the minute. We take all ideas. Our members content, following on from this then, but that we, in terms of additional information that we're seeking, that we find out how many private members' bills that were originally tabled over the course of the last number of mandates. How many were tabled, how many were dropped, how many made it through until they were either accepted or defeated by the Assembly. And what, if any, would our budget be currently for private members' bills? I'm sure that's maybe a difficult figure to get. It might just be whenever the staff is available, but we should be able to find out a costing for that, shouldn't we, Ciara?
I think specifically the drafting, because we have something to compare it to.
Yeah.
You know.
I see in the Dáil one, you're not allowed to exceed €5,000. So whatever they have as a total resource, each bill can't exceed €5,000.
But surely we have bills here that some of them could be £6,000, £7,000, others much smaller, and would one not settle against the other, basically even out? You could put a more expensive one through and then a cheaper one, so to speak.
And that's just what I think. Evan's point is a very, very valid one, is that, you know, the office costs allowance should be helping us to do our job as legislators. And I think that we should look into that as to why we can no longer use that, and whether that would be an option for us to look at again. Just in terms of the research, Ray, looking through it, has there been any assessment carried out of which is the most effective approach, or from asking you personally from your own reading through it, have you seen anything that makes you think that seems to tick most of the boxes, or has it not been possible to come to a conclusion like that?
I suppose, Chair, I'd be reluctant to sort of conclude as to maybe what's the best. I mean, I think you can take elements from each system and say, well, that's good, could that be applied? I mean, even the ballot in Wales, members have to undertake a fair amount of preparatory work before they can even go into the ballot, an explanatory memorandum, policy objective, consultation. Again, you look at the number of signatures, is that an idea that could be explored? So I wouldn't want to say, yes, the Welsh system, the Scottish system, or the Westminster model, but is it about perhaps taking elements from each and combining them, given the context within which the Assembly operates?
And are any of those other jurisdictions, to your knowledge, carrying out reviews or have previously carried out reviews of how they do those? Have there been any changes in Scotland or Wales since '98?
Well, I'm sure there have. I'm sure that the issue with this, and I know the House of Commons did do the Procedures Committee, but I suspect that some of this would be sort of internal documentation. So very happy to follow up. It may not necessarily be publicly available in terms of legislatures reviewing their sort of internal administrative practices, but happy to follow up.
Well, members, I think that's a good bit of work to start off with and sets the scene for us. Obviously, this evidence gathering will continue, but thank you, Ray, for your work. And that will now be made available. I take it on the Assembly website as well for others that want to have a look at. Can I just remind members that at the last meeting we agreed to seek written evidence from the political parties and independent members from the Speaker and Politics Plus. We also agreed to consider writing to some academics. 4 academics have been identified, and information on each of them is at pages 14 and 15 of your packs. Do members have any views on writing to these individuals? Do they think that would be useful to seek their views?
Do no harm. Yeah.
Okay, if members are happy to write to those individuals and see if we can get information. Are there any other organisations that the committee may wish to contact directly? This was your for last week, was to go away and think of anybody else that you might want to contact. No? Okay.
The Law Centre, perhaps,
The Law Centre?
Yeah, well, I know they frequently come forward with ideas about, particularly in relation to human rights. There's a fair amount of interaction between themselves and the Assembly. You might be willing to provide
Okay.
some.
Members agreed?
Yeah.
Okay. And the committee also agreed to seek views on specific aspects identified during the course of the review from other jurisdictions, individual MLAs and the executive. Do members wish to request further information from the research or other jurisdictions specifically arising from the research paper today, or any additional information that members would find useful? Okay, the committee agreed to publish its terms of reference after today's meeting alongside the research paper. The clerk has provided another paper outlining the current procedures for private members' bill support in the Assembly, which stakeholders may also find useful when preparing their responses. The paper is at page 18 for members' consideration, and are members content with the paper and to publish all documents online? Agreed? While the committee is not initiating a public call for evidence, details of the review will be placed online, inviting other interested organisations and individuals to submit views. Details of the review can also be publicised on the Twitter page of the Assembly. Are members content with that? Agreed? A draft letter inviting written evidence from stakeholders is at page 16. And a line will be added into the letter advising recipients that submissions will be published online. And again, our members agree.
Great.
Good. Okay, if members are content, we'll move into closed session to discuss the committee's review of provisions for standing orders as set out in the Assembly and Executive Reform Assembly opposition. The meeting will now move in to closed session, and we have no visitors. That meeting is now moved into public session. Agenda item 6, members' correspondence. At page 81 is correspondence from the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, inviting members to the launch of the Commission's annual statement on the 8th of December. And any members wishing to attend should respond via the link on the email. Agenda item 7 is the Forward Work Programme, which you find at page 83. Are members content with that? All right. Agenda item 8. Any other business?
Chair, just I noticed in the documents relating to the e-petition, that the Speaker's letter noted that interested members of the public might be used to test the beta version of the online petition. I think it's Mairead McMahon had written to the committee previously just
I've
for us
actually been in
to
contact with
suggest
Mairead.
that Mairead might be one of those interested members. Yeah, no problem. That's
She's
grand.
actually going to identify a few people
No problem.
for
That's
on our
great.
behalf.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Okay, no problem. If there's no other business then, the date and time of the next meeting will be on the 6th of December at 1:15 here in room 21. Thanks, adjourned.